Cold tea sat forgotten on the windowsill. Outside, October rain drummed a monotonous rhythm against glass grown foggy with autumn chill. The sound reminded me of the old grandfather clock in the hallway, that steady, relentless tick-marking time I had too much of and too little left. Eunice Grimshaw. That's who I am. 78 years breathing, 15 of them alone since Alfred passed. Some days I feel like I've lived a dozen different lives. And this final one, quiet, unnoticed, solitary, is merely the epilogue nobody asked for. The house stands as it always has. Victorian bones, 2 stories, a garden plot out back that's more weeds than wonder these days. Once upon a time, these walls rang with noise. Gavin's boyhood laughter echoing up the stairs. Alfred's voice drifting from his study. Sunday music floating through every room like a blessing. Now there's only creaking floorboards and the kitchen radio talking to itself. I pushed myself up from the chair, cane taking my weight as my knees sang their familiar song of complaint. Rain coming, they always knew before the sky did. Not that it mattered. The rain was already here. The mantelpiece held my gallery of ghosts. I stopped before the photograph in its simple wooden frame. Alfred on our wedding day, uncomfortable. In his formal suit, hair slicked back with too much pomade, wearing that embarrassed half-smile that meant he was happy but didn't know how to show it properly. He'd been an engineer at the local factory. A man of few words but many actions. Not with words but with deeds, he used to say. And he'd lived by it, fixing, building, providing, present. "What would you say, Alfred?" I whispered, my fingers leaving prints in the dust on the glass. "What would you say about our son now?" Gavin came to us 2 years after we married. We loved him completely, gave him everything we could, but we tried not to spoil him. At least, I thought we hadn't. He'd been a good boy, polite, hard-working, dreaming of following his father into engineering. Everything shifted when Alfred got sick. Lung cancer is ruthless. It took him fast, and I sometimes wonder if that was a mercy. Gavin was 37 then, already married to Laura, already working at the insurance company, already building his own life. I thought grief might pull us closer. Instead, it drove a wedge between us that I've never managed to remove. At the funeral, Gavin stood distant. Tall and thin with his father's features but none of his warmth. He stared past the grave as if the whole thing was happening to someone else. When they lowered the coffin, I wept. Gavin just looked at the horizon, calculating something I couldn't see. That evening, after everyone left, I asked if he was all right. "Mom, I'm 40. I'm not a child. You can't cling to the past." I didn't understand then that he was already leaving me behind. 3 years later came the divorce. Laura, sweet, naive Laura, who genuinely loved him, was suddenly history. "We grew out of the relationship," Gavin said, as if marriage were a coat you could simply outgrow. They had Keith, 10 years old when his parents split. Shared custody in theory, though the boy spent most of his time with his mother. That's when I started noticing the changes. Fewer calls, shorter visits. When Gavin did come around, he'd sit glued to his phone, talking about work, promotions, bonuses, cars, everything except us. "Gavin, honey, we've become such strangers," I said one afternoon over tea. He looked up from his screen, puzzled. "What are you talking about, Mom? I come, I call. What else do you want?" "Attention, son. Real attention," he sighed, that particular sigh you use for cranky children. "I've got a job, Mom. I've got a life. I can't sit here for hours talking about the neighbors or your TV shows." "That's not what You've always been like this, always demanding more than everyone else. Dad understood that, but you don't." The words hit harder than any slap could. I said nothing because what could I say? That I'd worked my whole life as a nurse so he could have everything he needed? That I'd denied myself everything when Alfred was dying to afford the best doctors? That I'd helped with the down payment on his house after Alfred was gone? No, I didn't say any of that. A mother shouldn't keep a ledger of good deeds. Over the years, I adjusted to a new reality. Gavin called when he needed something, usually money, roof repairs, vacations to recover from stress, new furniture to impress someone. I never refused. Maybe that was my mistake, forgiving too much, giving too readily. But isn't that what mothers do? Isn't that what I'd been saving for all those years? Keith became my light in the darkness. Unlike his father, he visited often, first with Laura, then on his own as he grew older. He helped in the garden, listened to my stories, brought books, brought life. "Grandma, you need to keep up with the times," he insisted, patiently teaching me to use a smartphone, a computer, video calls. "Otherwise, the world will pass you by." Thanks to Keith, I learned not just to call, but to navigate social media, shop online, even start a gardening blog. Growing roses and writing about them became my small sanctuary. A few dozen subscribers, mostly older women like myself, but it brought me joy. Keith went off to university in the neighboring town studying biology. We saw each other less, but video calls bridged the distance. He talked about his studies, his girlfriends, his plans. In him, I saw everything his father lacked: sincerity, kindness, the ability to truly listen. Last spring, Keith arrived with unexpected news. "Grandma, Dad's getting married." I was surprised. After the divorce, Gavin had dated various women, but nothing stuck. To whom? Jenny. She works at a dental office. They've been seeing each other for about a year, but kept it quiet. I vaguely remembered Gavin mentioning a Jenny in one of his infrequent calls. "Is she a good woman?" I asked carefully. Keith shrugged. "Normal, a little bossy. She acts differently with Dad than with everyone else. Sugar sweet when she wants to be, you know? But when she turns away, she's a different person." I nodded, recognizing the type. One face for the chosen, another for everyone else. "Well, if your father's happy, he says he is, but..." Keith lowered his voice. "I think he's just tired of being alone. Jenny's very persistent, and she has an 18-year-old daughter from her first marriage. They're like a package deal." I smiled at my clever grandson. "People get married for all kinds of reasons, honey. It's not for us to judge." "Yeah, but..." He hesitated. "They want a big wedding. Very expensive. Dad said he was going to ask you to help with the money." There it was. I felt the familiar bitterness, though I wasn't surprised. Of course, Gavin didn't call himself. He sent his son to test the waters. "Grandma, you don't have to," Keith continued, reading my reaction. "You have your own plans for that money." I brushed it off. "What plans at my age? A cruise around the world?" I tried to smile. "Money is for the living, not the dead. If your father needs help, I'll help." Keith shook his head. "Sometimes you're too kind, Grandma." Maybe he was right. But what else could I do? Refuse my only son? Besides, I hoped, foolishly perhaps, that the wedding might bring us closer. Maybe Jenny would be better than Keith described. Maybe she'd make Gavin happy, and a happy son is all a mother can ask for. Gavin called a week later, his voice carrying that strained cheerfulness that always preceded a request. "Mom, how's your health? You're not sick?" "I'm fine, son. My joints ache a little, but that's age." "Yes, age," he coughed. "Listen, I've got news. I've decided to get married." I feigned surprise. "Really? To whom?" "Her name's Jenny. She's a wonderful woman. You'll love her. Smart, caring, great hostess." "I'm happy for you," I said sincerely. "When are you planning the wedding?" Silence. "In 3 months. I know it's fast, but we don't want to wait. And you know, Mom." Another pause. "We want a beautiful ceremony. Jenny deserves the best." "Of course," I agreed. Every bride dreams of a beautiful wedding. And, he coughed again. You know, I've been having financial difficulties this past year. Renovations, new car. How much do you need, Gavin? I asked directly. The number he gave me nearly made me drop the phone. It was 3 times what I'd expected. That's a lot, son. I know, Mom, but it's a wedding. Once-in-a-lifetime thing. Well, second for Jenny, but she says the first one was a bust. She wants to do it right. Rent Hilltop Manor, invite 100 guests, live music. Hilltop Manor. The most expensive venue in Cumberland. An old mansion overlooking the lake. Beautiful beyond measure and expensive beyond reason. 100 guests? Do you have that many friends? Not just friends, colleagues, acquaintances, Jenny's relatives. He hesitated. Mom, you'll help, won't you? I'll pay you back, I promise. We both knew he wouldn't, just like he never paid back the money for the house, the car, the vacations. But I said yes, because he's my son, because I hoped this wedding would change things, because what else could I do? Okay, Gavin, I'll help. Thank you, Mom. He sounded genuinely relieved. You're the best. Jenny will be so happy. After that conversation, he called more often, every week, sometimes twice, talking about preparations, about Jenny, about her daughter Abby. It felt like we were getting closer again. I was happy about it, even though somewhere deep down, I knew he was only interested in the money. A month later, Gavin arrived with Jenny. She was pretty, dyed blonde hair, bright makeup, flashy manicure. She smiled constantly, but her eyes remained cold, calculating. She looked around the house, her gaze lingering on the antique clock, the silver tea set I'd inherited from my mother. What lovely things, she said. They must be expensive. Yes, I answered. They belong to my mother. Antiques are so valuable now, she said casually, appraisingly. We drank tea and discussed the wedding. Or rather, they talked, and I listened. Jenny described the dress, the flowers, the menu in exhaustive detail. Gavin nodded along, looking like someone who'd heard it all 100 times but still pretended to find it fascinating. Is there anything I can do to help besides financing? I asked. Oh, don't worry, Eunice. Jenny patted my arm. At your age, it's better to rest. The wedding planner and I will handle everything. I'm not that infirm, I said. I could help. With seating arrangements or... No, it's already planned, she interrupted. Just come and enjoy yourself. As they left, Jenny gave me a brief, formal hug. We're so glad you'll be at our wedding, Eunice. It means a lot to Gavin. Something in her tone set me on edge, as if she were doing me a favor by allowing me to attend my own son's wedding, the wedding I was financing. After they left, I sat at the window for a long time, watching rain streak the glass. Something told me this wedding wouldn't bring Gavin and me closer, but I pushed the thought away. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Jenny truly loved him. Maybe it was just hard for me to let go, to accept that my son had chosen another woman as the center of his life. Keith called that evening. How did it go, meeting your future daughter-in-law? He asked with slight irony. Fine, I said, not wanting to turn my grandson against his father. She's energetic. Keith laughed. That's one word for it. Grandma, be careful. Jenny knows how to charm when she wants something. I have nothing to give her but money for the wedding, and I've already promised that. It's not just money, Keith said seriously. She wants to control everything around Dad, including you. I'm hard to control, I smiled. I'm too old for that. I hope so, Grandma. Just don't let them use you, okay? I promised. But even then, I knew something had started, something I couldn't stop. Like a snowball rolling down a mountain, gaining speed and mass, and I was just an observer, powerless to change its trajectory. The morning was overcast but dry, a small victory for my aching joints. I made my way slowly downstairs, gripping the banister. Today was the first meeting with the wedding planner. Gavin had called yesterday saying he'd arranged a cab to pick me up at 10. Be ready, Mom. Don't be late, Miss Potter is a very busy person. He'd spoken hurriedly, as if I were a child prone to tardiness. I wanted to remind him I'd never been late once in my entire life. Not to work at the hospital, not to parent-teacher conferences, not to his school concerts. But I didn't. I'd been silent a lot lately. By 9:30, I was ready. Gray dress with a collar, pearl brooch, Alfred's gift for our 20th anniversary, low-heeled shoes. I checked my reflection, fixing my gray hair into a neat bun. The cab arrived exactly at 10. The 20-minute drive to Hilltop Manor carried us through familiar Cumberland streets. The corner store that used to be a bookstore and now sold coffee. The park where little Gavin fed the ducks. The hospital where I'd worked for 35 years. Hilltop Manor greeted me with stately Georgian elegance, an 18th-century mansion surrounded by manicured parkland overlooking the lake. I thought of the check I'd written Gavin 2 weeks ago and sighed. A lifetime of saving slipping through my fingers. Jenny met me at the entrance, her makeup flawless, hair styled in perfect waves, her tight beige dress emphasizing her figure. She made me feel old and out of place, un-Eunice finally. She air-kissed near my cheek. "Miss Potter and I have already started. Come quickly." I wanted to say I'd arrived exactly on time, but again I remained silent. No point starting the day with arguments. Gavin and a woman in her 40s wearing an austere suit waited for us in the spacious hallway with its marble floor and crystal chandeliers. My son looked tense, like he was in an important business meeting. "Mom, this is Veronica Potter, the best wedding coordinator in the county. Veronica, this is my mother, un-Eunice Grimshaw." Miss Potter explained the concept. Elegant, modern wedding with traditional elements. Ceremony on the terrace overlooking the lake, cocktails in the garden, dinner in the main hall. Color scheme, lavender, silver, and white. Alfred, my late husband, was always fond of white roses, I mentioned when flowers came up. Jenny gave me an odd look. "We haven't approved roses yet, Aunt Eunice. Personally, I'm leaning towards peonies." We stepped onto the terrace. The view was breathtaking, manicured lawn sloping toward the lake, light mist hovering above water. "The arch will go here," Miss Potter indicated the terrace center. Chairs arranged in a semicircle. After vows, the newlyweds descend these stairs to the garden for cocktails. "What if it rains?" I asked. "Weather here is unpredictable." Jenny rolled her eyes, but Miss Potter replied patiently, "We have a backup plan. The ceremony moves to the music parlor in case of inclement weather." In the main hall, Miss Potter unfolded the seating plan. 10 round tables of 10, plus a head table for newlyweds and immediate family. "Who sits at the head table?" I asked. "Gavin, me, my daughter Abby, my parents, my brother and his wife, and 2 close friends," Jenny answered without looking at me. "And me?" Awkward pause. "Mom, there are only 10 seats at the head table," Gavin finally said. "We thought you'd be more comfortable at a table with your friends." "What friends?" I was confused. "You didn't invite anyone I know." Jenny and Gavin exchanged glances. "Well, we thought you'd tell us who to invite," my son said uncertainly. "I didn't name anyone because you didn't ask." My voice shook. "I assumed I'd sit next to you, Gavin. I am your mother, after all." Miss Potter coughed uncomfortably. "I'm sure we can revise the seating, perhaps add a seat at the head table." No, Jenny quickly intervened. "It's already approved. Symmetry is important for photographs." "Un-Eunice, you realize a wedding is first and foremost about the couple, don't you?" Heat flooded my face. Of course the wedding was about the newlyweds, but was it normal for the groom's mother to sit in a corner with strangers? "It's okay," I said, forcing a smile. "I can sit wherever you want." Gavin exhaled with relief. Jenny smiled victoriously. When the conversation turned to wine selection, I ventured, "What about Laurent champagne? Great quality, but not as expensive as Cristal." Jenny looked at me as if I'd suggested serving vinegar. "Laurent? Really? At my wedding?" "I was just suggesting it," I shrugged. "It's considerable savings." Eunice, Jenny lowered her voice. If you can't afford a proper wedding, just say so. The humiliation stung more than anger. I didn't say I couldn't afford it. I merely offered a reasonable alternative. Mom, please, Gavin interjected. Let's trust the professionals. By noon, planning was complete. We moved to the restaurant for lunch. Jenny immediately ordered the most expensive wine on the menu. I mentally calculated how many more such gestures I could afford before my savings ran dry. You know, Eunice, I've always wanted a real wedding, Jenny said, becoming more talkative. The first time was so modest. Town hall, dinner for 20. My husband insisted on saving money. But now I can do everything I dreamed of. On me, I thought, but smiled politely. And your dress? Have you picked it out? Oh, yes. Jenny's eyes lit up. Designer, coming from London. Ivory, embroidered with crystals, 3-meter train. Sounds impressive. What about you, Gavin? Custom-made suit, my son said, embarrassed. There's a tailor in London. Of course, bespoke, Jenny interrupted. Can't show up in a store-bought suit. As the car pulled up to my house, Jenny said, By the way, Eunice, about your outfit, what are you planning to wear? I have a blue dress. I wore it to a friend's wedding last year. Blue doesn't really fit our color scheme. You'll need something silver or very light lavender, and not so old-fashioned. No collars and brooches. I felt a pang of resentment. My collars and brooches were part of me, part of my style. All right, I'll think about it. Don't think, do it, Jenny smiled her fake smile. The pictures need to be perfect. That evening, Keith called. How was the meeting with the organizer? Informative, I replied evasively. Hilltop Manor is beautiful and crazy expensive. Did you like their ideas? It was. Luxurious. Grandma, I know that tone. What's wrong? Nothing much. I just feel a little sidelined. I'm paying for the wedding but have no say in decisions. I'm surprised Dad allows it. Keith sounded annoyed. He's always been soft, but not to this extent. Jenny's spinning him however she wants. Maybe he's just in love, I suggested. People lose their heads in love. At 52, after a divorce and 20 years on his own? No, Grandma. Jenny's manipulative. Keith, honey, don't worry. It's their day, their decision. It's not right. I'll talk to Daddy. Please don't, I said hastily. I don't want to cause trouble. You're not causing trouble. They're being disrespectful. You're paying for all this madness and they treat you like an unwelcome guest.